Hello, and welcome again to Business Summit. My name is Eunice Peregrino-Date. In this episode, we'll be featuring the BUSAC Fund and its contribution to the private sector development of this country. With us is Dr. Rachmeler, the fund manager of BUSAC Fund. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
We want to find out exactly what BUSAC is all about, what its objectives are, its mandate in this country, and how they have supported initiatives towards the private sector development. And with our interest in MSMEs, we want to find out exactly how MSMEs are benefiting from the fund. We'll go on a quick commercial break. We'll take it up when we get back. Please don't go away. Thank you for staying with us. Dr. Rachmeler, you're welcome again.
Thank you.
We want to understand what the mandate of BUSAC is. We know BUSAC 1 has elapsed and you're into a new funding program. We want to find out what BUSAC Fund is all about, and then we'll take it up.
BUSAC Fund is actually a mechanism by which the private sector enabling environment is improved over time by providing grants to business associations who then advocate for changes in the legal and regulatory frameworks that may be in place that create barriers that hinder their doing business. And so Danida, the development arm of the Danish government, created the BUSAC Fund in 2004 as a pilot project to find out whether or not allowing private sector business associations to use the tool we call advocacy in creating a better enabling environment such that at the end of the day, businesses without barriers can do what they do best, which is to increase wealth, create jobs, and prosper. And indeed, the government's strategy for support in the private sector is exactly that. But saying it is one thing, doing it is something completely different. And so, in reality, Danida embedded the BUSAC Fund, which is Business Sector Advocacy Challenge Fund, within a larger project, which was their sector support to the business sector in Ghana. And over the first 5 years of BUSAC, that we call BUSAC 1, we provided grants on a competitive basis to business associations throughout the entire country, whereby it wasn't the BUSAC Fund management that determined what the problems were, it was the private sector themselves. And so in reality, the BUSAC Fund is a demand-driven advocacy challenge fund such that grants are competitive. I don't determine who gets them, somebody else does. And once those grants are given, then the private sector uses those funds to implement advocacy actions. And those actions are determined by the business association in particular. And in phase 1, we allowed not only business associations in Ghana, but media houses and labor unions to also apply to the BUSAC Fund. And over the 5 years, we picked 362 of them to actually provide funding to. The mechanisms of selecting the associations, monitoring the grants, and ultimately achieving final results and impact is another story. Advocacy is still in its infancy in the business sector in Ghana, and 5 years is only a small period of time in which to judge whether or not advocacy is alive or well, and whether or not there is any sustainability in advocacy once the donor community or the development partners decide we have launched the program. Now it's up to the business sector to take the ball and run with it into the future. And so Danida decided that after phase 1, and persuading 2 other donors to help them as well, that is DFID, the British government, and USAID from the American government, to actually design a phase 2, another 5-year program, and then make the decision after 10 years whether or not business advocacy is effective, whether it is sustainable, and whether regulatory and legal reforms do indeed reduce and remove barriers to doing business. And so I was fortunate to be the fund manager in phase 1, and indeed am the fund manager in phase 2. And so there are many lessons that we learned, there are many success stories, but at the same time, they're balanced by many groups that did not succeed in using advocacy effectively. But overall, I can say very confidently that business advocacy works in Ghana. And indeed, the Ghanaian model of business advocacy, unlike other countries where certain development partners have other advocacy programs, the way in which Ghana has used its own innate capabilities, has used the press and the media, particularly the free media, in a very effective way. And perhaps the most single important issue is that the government of Ghana, duty bearers, have the characteristics of listening. All duty bearers will listen, and sometimes it will go in one ear and out the other, but it is listening and acting. And this acting is truly at the heart of successful advocacy. And therefore you can talk and advocate and influence all you want, but at the end of the day, if the target of the advocacy action doesn't act on what they've heard, then the advocacy is only half successful. But in the modern era, business advocacy, the change in legal and regulatory frameworks requires intelligence, it requires high capability with your voice. I don't build anything. I don't provide money for roads or for construction of buildings. I provide money for people to speak up, and in a persuasive and influential fashion.
So what has been some of the responses from all these actions, all these monies that have been spent? I'm sure there have been some success stories, as you have indicated. We want to find out if you can, tell us some of the changes that have been realized as a result of those positive, advocacy actions that have been taking place, through BUSAC's efforts.
Well, obviously, when you have hundreds of grants, I have the ability to find and detect both large successes, small successes, and it really depends on who you are. At the national level, we give grants to what's known in Ghana as apex associations, and these are the groups like the Association of Ghana Industries, which is generally regarded as the spokes group for the private sector whenever government ministries hold big conferences or meetings, to the National Chamber of Commerce, to a group that was created in the 90s called the Private Enterprise Foundation, the Ghana Bankers Association, the Ghana Journalists, the Institute of Architects, the Institute of Engineers. These apex associations operate mostly at the national level here in Accra and deal with national levels and national level issues. And in one particular case, an issue that affects all businesses in Ghana, obviously, is the cost of doing business, and particularly taxation. And do businesses pay taxes? Are they registered? Unfortunately, most businesses in Ghana are still in the informal sector, and so they're under the radar. But we support, through advocacy grants, everybody from the National Chamber of Commerce to taxi drivers and hairdressers, to masons and plumbers, to corn millers, to fishermen, to indeed all the artisans, to service delivery, trade, manufacturing, industry, the media, national associations such as the engineers and the architects and the bankers, all the way down to disabled women that indeed are perhaps at the bottom of the scale in the business community. And so this ability to actually intervene at all levels of the business community in Ghana allows for demand-driven advocacy to obtain results that are interesting and at all of these levels. And I wish to be able to describe to you several of the success stories that will demonstrate the power of advocacy in Ghana and indeed why advocacy is alive and well here. And this is truly, because of the pilot nature of BUSAC 1, now going to be reinforced in BUSAC 2. And we're hoping that indeed the lessons that we did learn from these successes and failures as well will make business advocacy in Ghana in the next 5 years even more effective, and we will have much more impact with respect to reforming the business community and the environment in which they work.
That's great. We'd like to take a quick commercial break on this note. When we get back, we'd like to hear more of those success stories that you talked about. We'll be right back after this short break. Don't go away. Thank you for staying with us. Doc, can you continue with some of those specific success stories that we're talking about and how they've impacted on advocacy and providing the kind of enabling environment that those specific businesses in those areas need to propel them to the next level, hopefully?
We have many, but here are a few examples. At the national level, the issue of taxation in Ghana is an important one because invariably the business community is requiring service delivery from government agencies. The government agencies are complaining that they don't have enough funds from the national budget. And so the issue really revolves around the revenue exchange between the tax net and the tax gains. And so the National Chamber of Commerce actually tackled the issue of business taxation by doing research on what are the tax laws in the corporate environment and looking at the reasonableness of what those laws actually stated. And based upon that research, they determined that several of the laws were very much outdated and outmoded, and therefore proposed as part of their dialogue with the Parliament, and particularly the Select Committee on Finance, that it behooved them, in order to increase the tax revenue receipts to the government, to modify the legal framework for national taxation for corporations. There are 21 of these taxes, and indeed, the National Chamber of Commerce was able to advocate effectively such that 6 of the 21, the rates were reduced significantly. Capital gains, for example, on investments, used to be 15%, it's now 5%. The tax rates on rental income, leasing, which is becoming increasingly more important, reduced by 50%.
50%?
By 50% from 12 to 6, due to the interventions of the Chamber of Commerce. Indeed, in phase 2, the Chamber of Commerce is hoping to receive more grants to look at more issues within the taxation field. But taxation affects every business in Ghana, and therefore their grant, even though only 6 of the 21 corporate taxes were actually reformed and modified, has a very large impact on the business community. At the same time, if you look at regional or local levels, we've had equal numbers of successes. Perhaps one of the most discriminated groups in all of Ghana are disabled women business persons. And in Upper West region, there is a unique group of 20 disabled women who challenged the status quo and received a grant from us saying that one of the Ministry of Trade and Industry's agencies, the National Bureau for Small Scale Industry, was not providing services to them. Indeed, because of their handicaps, they couldn't even get into MBSSI's facilities, much less access the services. So they advocated to MBSSI, you need to create special programs for us. We have special needs, and MBSSI listened to them and actually acted such that there is now a tailor-made program within the Upper West MBSSI office to satisfy the needs of these 20 women. Now, that kind of specialized attention by a national government agency is somewhat unheard of.
Yeah.
And these women who are truly challenged, both by physical and by where they are in Upper West, succeeded due to the power of their voice. As a result, I gave them a second grant. They applied, they competed, and they won a second grant. But this grant was aimed at access of credit and was not aimed at MBSSI, but was aimed at the private banking community. Unfortunately, the power of their voice to private bankers was not sufficient for the bankers to provide tailor-made loans to this group. But it did raise up their identity. They became more confident. They are now well known in Upper West and in WA, and that sets the stage for them to do further advocacy. However, perhaps the single greatest success story of BUSAC 1 deals with a very unique group called the Dynamic Spare Parts Dealers Association in Swami Magazine. And this particular group, led by a dynamic executive and in combination with a consultant, created an application to BUSAC to create a blueprint for the decongestion of Swami Magazine. Now, all Ghanaians know about Swami Magazine, but people outside of Ghana don't know, it is perhaps the single densest cluster of metal-related workers on the entire continent. Swami Magazine is a small residential quarter of Kumasi and has grown from 4,000 people to over 200,000 people over the last 40 years, such that anything that's made out of metal, junk, spare parts, parts of cars can be found in Swami Magazine. But it is so clustered and so condensed that people are standing on top of each other. So this little group of 60 spare parts dealers dared to hire a consultant through our grant mechanism to actually create a blueprint and a roadmap for the next 10 years and the creation of a planned industrial village organization. Out of the first grant, the blueprint was developed and presented to the Kumasi Metropolitan Authority, and they thought it was wonderful. Wow! Dynamic spare parts dealers coming up with a blueprint.
Never happened.
Never before. And as a result, these 60 gentlemen decided we need to create a bigger group. And so out of the first grant emerged a brand new association called the Swami Magazine Industrial Development Organization, SMIDU, and combined not just the spare parts dealers, but the welders, the chromers, the painters, the garages, the junk metal dealers, 17 other business associations came under the same umbrella, and they applied to us a second time. This time, they wanted to actually do more than theory, the blueprint. How are they going to implement this blueprint? Single greatest limiting factor was access to land to decongest Swami Magazine. So their second grant dealt with trying to advocate to the KMA, the Kumasi Metropolitan Authority, but most importantly, the traditional authorities of the Akan peoples to access additional land that then could be developed using the blueprint. And their second grant also succeeded such that the KMA, in association with the traditional authorities, allocated and identified 1,000 acres just north of the city to indeed decluster and decongest the Swami Magazine area. So the second phase of a multiple phase set of actions succeeded in that agreement was given. In theory, we can provide you this land. It's still theory because they're still negotiating the lease agreements, but just recently, that agreement came to fruition. The third grant to Swami Magazine dealt with actual other issues that emerge out of making a larger organization. Management, training, getting other partners. They created a board of patrons. They have now partnerships with the Kofi Annan ICT Center to train, in many cases, semi-literate garage mechanics in the use of computers to diagnose modern cars and trucks. Swami Magazine and SMIDU is the example of the power of the voice, the emergence of an idea, the acceptance of that idea by target decision makers, and then the collaboration between targets who act and business community who need those actions. And indeed, in phase 2, I expect to fund Swami Magazine and SMIDU for multiple other grants to tackle the other steps in this 10-year program.
This is wonderful. I mean, this is really good news. It tells us that advocacy really works when it comes to taking actions and, telling other policymakers and other facilitators to take action and making a difference in the way businesses are undertaken. Now, we're looking at the business environment here, and our focus is on MSMEs. All these actions that have been undertaken have impacted one way or the other the business environments within which those specific organizations or businesses are working and are focused on. Would like to end here in the next few minutes, so we want to hear from you what really is on your heart to tell the MSME population out there, and what actions do you think that continued advocacy can do in helping and supporting the business environment to flourish, and by so doing support the MSME sector?
My pleasure. Indeed, the MSME sector, which means micro and small and medium enterprises, is mostly in the informal sector, meaning that these businesses are under the radar. They don't register. They avoid paying taxes. They operate under the law, if you wish. And really what the government wants to see is the growth and expansion of the formal sector, the transformation of informal sector operators, MSMEs, into formal sector operators where they are registered, they pay their taxes, they receive services from government agencies, but most importantly, they create jobs. And job creation is perhaps the single greatest challenge in Ghana these days, which is how do you create opportunities that generate jobs that lead to economic growth? The challenges will always be there. I'm an American, and there are plenty of poor communities in the United States, despite the wealth that the United States represents. Ghana wishes to take their business community from, if you wish, the 18th century and move it into the 21st century in a very short period of time. Advocacy, which is the power of influencing decision-making through the strength of your voice, not by twisting your arm, but by using influential talking, has shown to be successful in Ghana. Indeed, Danita, the lead donor of this particular program, has a sister project in Tanzania where they've had fewer successes because they've only concentrated at the apex level, where in reality, advocacy is more effective at the local level, where small businesses, MSMEs, and business associations who are trying to provide services to their members, advocacy is one of them, are able to dialogue directly with district assemblies, with district chief executives, with directors of the agencies of national ministries who are in the field and are tasked with providing services to the local population. And invariably, because they are so far away from the capital, the delivery of those services are generally lacking or are not sufficient to satisfy the needs of the population. So BUSAC has the luxury of reaching down to the very lowest level, an association of 20 carpenters, an association of 20 market women in Northern Volta region, an association of corn millers who need better access to electricity, to the inland canoe fishermen who need premix, and the pricing for premix is really an issue for them. And as such, reaching to the lowest level, empowering people who are afraid to use their voices is the true legacy of the phase one of BUSAC. And it is because of this, I believe, that the development partners in phase two actually created the phase two, because there was hope and enough success in phase one to merit another 5-year program. Indeed, we have a new development partner in phase two, and that is the European Union. And the United States government has increased their contribution significantly, and the entire BUSAC 2 program is twice as large as the BUSAC 1 program. And that there are other things that we're going to do that we learned. One is increase capacity. Business associations aren't born with leadership, don't know how to manage money very well, don't know how to fundraise and get more assets, have hard time growing their association. So in addition to doing advocacy in BUSAC 2, we're actually going to be involved with strengthening associations from the ground up, which is not directly doing advocacy, but is creating the foundation upon which advocacy works. And I have to say that, again, this project is unique, it is successful, and is indeed providing the opportunities that most businesses in Ghana have never, ever in their past had. And as such, I think you can expect a much greater rate of success in phase two than we had in phase one.
Thank you so much, Dr. Adele Rachmeler, for spending time with us. We've learned quite a bit about your operations under BUSAC 1, and we are hoping that more associations and more organizations will benefit from phase two, so that advocacy will see a larger platform and the business environment will improve much further than we have experienced through the support of BUSAC 1, so that MSMEs at the end of the day will benefit from the larger operations in this country. Thank you so much for coming. Before we go, we'd like to say a big thank you to our sponsors. We'd like to acknowledge the Export Development and Investment Fund, EDIF, Alia Beauty Palace, Mirage Royal Hotel, Business and Financial Times, Business Times Magazine, Ultimate Advertising, Mobilia Showroom, and local fuel systems. Thank you so much, and keep watching Business Summit. Bye-bye.